Saturo, a 29-year-old guy, leads a pretty routine life. Though he loves his job as a manga artist, the hard truth is that he struggles to make ends meet. So he also moonlights as a pizza delivery guy. His life might seem like anyone else's, but there's a twist. Sometimes, right on the brink of a tragedy, he experiences something he calls a return. It's like time rewinds a few minutes, giving him a chance to avert disaster. One day, while out delivering pizzas, he goes through one of these returns and spots a truck about to hit a kid. Bravely, he saves the boy, but he ends up getting hit himself. Waking up in the hospital, he finds his friend Eri by his side, showering him with praises for his bravery. Back home, there's a surprise waiting. His mother, Sachiko, is in his apartment cooking his favorite dinner. Though Saturo complains a bit, Sachiko insists on staying to take care of him. Over dinner, Sachiko brings back memories of those dark days from his childhood when their town was plagued by kidnappings and murders. They pinned it on his then 20-year-old friend, Yuki. On a trip to the mall with his mother, Saturo has another return. This time, he manages to prevent the kidnapping of a little girl. Sachiko, ever observant, locks eyes with the would-be kidnapper. After some contemplation, she recognizes the man and suspects he might be the real culprit behind those crimes 18 years ago. Eager to share her revelation with Saturo, Sachiko awaits his return. However, an intruder suddenly breaks into the apartment, stabbing Sachiko before she can speak. Arriving home to find his mother lifeless, Saturo falls to his knees, heartbroken. A neighbor, seeing him with bloodied hands, calls the police. They attempt to arrest him, but Saturo manages to escape. Running frantically, he suddenly finds himself in an unfamiliar setting. Coming to his senses, he realizes he's experienced an extensive return, taking him back to 1988 when he was 10, the year of the kidnappings. Shaking off the initial shock, he determines he's been sent back to prevent the kidnappings and his mother's death. Joyfully reuniting with his mother, Saturo quickly sets out to prevent the first kidnapping of his classmate, Kayo. He decides to approach her by befriending her. However, he learns that Kayo leads a tough life, evident from her reserved demeanor and bruises on her legs. Kenja, Saturo's friend, commends his effort to get close to Kayo and shows him a text she wrote titled, "The Town Where Only I Am Missing." This poignant story hints at the torment Kayo faces from her mother. Saturo invites Kayo to his upcoming birthday party, discovering they share the same birth date, March 2nd. Remembering Kayo's disappearance in that month, he pinpoints March 1st as the crucial day, giving him just 11 days to change fate. While searching for Kayo in a park, he reunites with Yuki, and after a fun afternoon, Saturo is more convinced than ever that Yuki isn't the culprit. This means he has another person to save from the tragic events. Yuki, who is waiting for the death penalty in Saturo's present year of 2006. When Saturo continues looking for Kayo at her home, he finds her huddled on the floor of her shed, scantily clad and covered in bruises. However, moments later, her mother Akemi finds them, orders her daughter back into the house, and sends Saturo home. The next day, the boy talks with his teacher Yashiro, who reveals he also suspected Kayo's mother was abusing her, but has been unable to get the youth welfare office involved. Later in class, Misato accuses Kayo of stealing the students' lunch money, but Saturo and Yashiro quickly quash the false accusations. That night, our protagonist has a special surprise for the birthday girl. He takes her for a walk in the woods, where they come upon a magnificent Christmas tree and marvel, hand in hand, under the starry sky. A few days before the kidnapping date, Saturo invites her to spend the day with him, keeping her away from her mother. While walking through the science center, the boy experiences a strange feeling of déjà vu, suddenly recalling he was also there 18 years ago. Tuesday is D-Day. Saturo spends the entire day with her at the youth center and then escorts her home in the evening. Saturo keeps watch over Kayo's house and breathes a sigh of relief when midnight strikes without any major incidents. The next day, while shopping for their birthday party, he experiences another déjà vu at the supermarket. Back home, the two birthday celebrants are warmly greeted by their friends and have a joyful celebration. Saturo falls asleep, relieved and happy, thinking he managed to change the future and avert the tragedy. But the next day, after oversleeping and rushing to school, he discovers Kayo isn't there. Distressed, he couldn't prevent her disappearance, merely delaying it by 2 days. 6 days later, the second victim, Aya from a neighboring school, also goes missing. The incidents from 18 years ago seem to be replaying almost identically. Days later, when Saturo passes by Kayo's house, he sees Akemi remorselessly disposing of her daughter's belongings. His desperation takes over, and he runs frantically down the street. Suddenly, he's back in 2006, a 29-year-old once again. He's still under suspicion for his mother's murder and is urgently sought by the police. When his restaurant manager contacts him, Saturo initially thinks he has found a safe haven, but it turns out to be a trap as the manager is in cahoots with the police. Eri rescues him from his predicament and hides him at her place, firmly believing in his innocence. The next day, Saturo scours all available information about Kayo's disappearance, realizing his actions did have an impact, though not enough. But when the manager suspects Eri is harboring Saturo, he must flee again, finding his next hideout under a bridge. While Eri is gathering some things to bring to Saturo, she receives a chilling message on her phone. Suddenly, a room fills with thick smoke and is engulfed in a violent explosion. When Saturo arrives at the burning house, he rushes in to save her. She seems too heavy for Saturo to carry alone, but suddenly the manager arrives and assists him. To avoid running into the police, the manager drives only the last stretch to the door. Eri quickly slips her phone into Saturo's pocket before he escapes out the back. After Saturo reads the message on Eri's phone, he immediately calls an old journalist colleague of his mother's and arranges a meeting. The man, named Sawada, informs him about the official reports from the series of 1988 kidnappings. The crimes always had one thing in common. They pointed to Yuki as the perpetrator. Sachiko, having now uncovered the real identity of the author, was likely murdered by the same man to keep her silent. Later on, Saturo and Eri meet up again under the bridge, where Eri reveals that she suspects a man named Nishizono is behind her house's fire. Suddenly, the police show up to apprehend Saturo. As he's being led to the police car in handcuffs, he spots a man standing among the investigators that feels eerily familiar before being shoved into the police vehicle. Saturo knows he still has a mission to fulfill and manages to force a return to 1988 through sheer willpower. He finds himself in the Science Center on February 28th, right when he had his first déjà vu experience, making it seem as if he's back in the same timeline as before. Now, Saturo has a third shot at altering the course of events. The next day at school, Kenya approaches Saturo to discuss the noticeable shift in his demeanor over the past few weeks. He promises Saturo that he will help him save Kayo. On March 2nd, when Saturo and Kayo return home, they're once again surprised with a birthday party by their friends, celebrating joyfully. But to ensure things don't play out like the last time, Saturo briefly leaves the party to head to Yuki's house. He throws a rock through Yuki's window, providing himself with a solid alibi as the police will be tied up with Yuki that night. Then, Saturo seeks out Kayo's mother. He plans to push her down the stairs, but at the last moment, Kenya intervenes, reminding him there must be other ways to bring down Akemi. The two return to the party, and Saturo shares his new plan with Kayo. He intends to kidnap her with her consent and hide her in an old abandoned bus for the coming days. However, on the second night at the bus, things take a creepy turn. An unknown man steps inside. Kayo manages to hide until he leaves, but the encounter leaves her shaken up. On March 3rd, Yashiro tells Saturo he's reported Kayo's disappearance to the Youth Welfare Office and wants to pay a visit to Kayo's mom that very night. But when the officials show up, they find only an empty house. Back at the bus, Kayo asks Saturo to stick around for the night, scared that the creepy stranger might return. She points out a backpack and a cardboard box that look like they belong to the perpetrator. Checking its contents, Saturo's heart drops as he instantly recognizes the kidnapper's tools. This means they're smack dab in the middle of the perpetrator's turf, right in the thick of the crime spiral. So Saturo decides it's best to take Kayo to his place for a safe night's stay. Come March 4th, after enjoying her very first homemade breakfast, Kayo finally returns to her mom's house, escorted by Saturo and Sachiko. Akemi is livid about her daughter's disappearance, but in the middle of her tantrum, child welfare officials pop in. As Akemi tries to drag Kayo off to the police, she's suddenly stopped by her estranged mother. With tears in her eyes, she apologizes to Akemi for not supporting her enough, especially during her abusive relationship with her ex-husband and as a single mom to Kayo. The two share a tearful embrace, with the grandma promising to take good care of Kayo. As they part ways, Kayo thanks Saturo for saving her life. Now that Kayo is safe, Saturo shifts his focus to the next potential victims of the kidnapping spree. First up is a girl from the neighboring school, Aya. Saturo starts tailing Aya to understand her routines, but unexpectedly bumps into her mom. Soon after, their teacher, Yashiro, offers them a ride home, helping with their heavy shopping bags. But what's this? Saturo spots a suspicious stash of lollipops in Yashiro's glove compartment. The teacher tries to brush it off with a lame excuse. The next day, Saturo and his friends introduce themselves to Aya. She's suspicious at first, but Kazu manages to persuade her by mentioning he peeked into her secret hideout. Since Aya and Kazu seem to get along well, Saturo feels that she's in good hands and turns his attention to the third victim, his classmate Hiromi. He tells Saturo that he had noticed Misato being shunned by her classmates ever since the day she falsely accused Kayo of stealing, seeing a potential new victim in the lonely Misato. Saturo follows her to the hockey rink, but loses her there after she apparently doesn't return from the bathroom. Instead, Saturo encounters Yashiro, who informs him that Misato has just left the building. Just then, a van from Yuki's family passes by. Saturo and Yashiro decide to chase the van into the night. But suddenly, Yashiro reveals himself to Saturo as the real culprit. He harbors deep resentment towards Saturo for constantly thwarting his plans over the last 2 weeks, almost as if he knew the future. Therefore, Yashiro devised his revenge plan, using Misato as bait to lure Saturo to the hockey rink and then to his car. Now his car is headed for a frozen lake. Yashiro exits the car and watches it slowly sink into the ice. As Saturo futilely attempts to escape from the seatbelt, he submerges into the icy water, and beautiful moments of his life flash before his eyes. In 2003, he awakens from a coma. His mother has cared for his body every day for 15 years, so Saturo progresses quickly thanks to physiotherapy. But although he gradually regains control of his body, his memory of what happened seems to have vanished. But a visit from Kenya and Hiromi helps Saturo slowly begin to piece together the puzzle of his past. Kayo also visits Saturo a little later. She's now married and cradles her baby in her arms. Another old acquaintance of Saturo couldn't wait to see him finally after waking from the coma. Yashiro, now a successful high-ranking politician under the false name of Nishizono, takes advantage of Saturo's memory lapses and plays the role of a caring class teacher, visiting his former student in the hospital regularly. However, Saturo's memories of Yashiro's attempted murder and kidnapping attempts of his school friends gradually return, which Yashiro quickly suspects. Yashiro takes Saturo in his wheelchair to the hospital roof, accusing him once again of continually thwarting his plans 15 years ago. He threatens to kill Saturo, but Saturo knows there's something holding him back. The mystery of how Saturo was able to predict and foil Yashiro's plans back then. Anger, but also fascination with Saturo, have given Yashiro's life meaning for the last 15 years. Saturo is confident that Yashiro won't harm him because of their strong connection. This suspicion is confirmed when Saturo tries to throw himself from the roof, and Yashiro catches him at the last moment. When Yashiro realizes that he really can't live without Saturo, he starts to cry. He lets go of Saturo and wants to throw himself from the roof as well. However, just before doing so, Yashiro discovers that Saturo's fall has been intercepted. Saturo had told his friends days earlier that he had fully regained his memory, and that Yashiro was guilty of the crimes. They had devised a plan together, and now the police are on the roof, ready to arrest Yashiro for attempting to murder Saturo once again. A few years later, Saturo has finally managed to pursue his passion and succeed as a manga artist. One day after work, he takes a stroll and coincidentally encounters Eri, right under the bridge where they both were when Saturo had his last return, leading him to save so many lives. Thanks for watching the video to the end. See you next time.